My name is Joel Silverstein. Tonight I am a guest curator, and we curated this exhibition called Genesis, the Beginning of Creativity. This was a massive undertaking. So again, I am a guest curator here, but I am a founding member of the Jewish Art Salon. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to thank and introduce the people who are here tonight for that. I am director of exhibitions currently, a title that I hold with Richard McVie. We split it, and Richard is on the end there. That's the first thing. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This is a big event. I guess for me, it feels like a huge birthday party. I have to say this. Genesis was 3.5 years in the making. 3.5 years. We started before the COVID pandemic, and then it evolved. And a lot of that had to do, I think, with the danger and horrific conditions of COVID, and the world seemed to be tearing itself apart. And we thought to ourselves, wouldn't it be great to have an exhibition that was really inclusive and would actually do something? So our first thought was, what could we pick where different religions could have a conversation? And what we came up with was Genesis, because Genesis is a book that is sacred to Jews and Christians, but it also used in the Islamic world as commentary. So the three Abrahamic religions have a strong relationship to Genesis and understand it slightly differently, but within the same ballpark of experience. I thought, well, what a great way to begin an exhibition, because we only did Genesis 1 to 4. Okay, so these are the creation narratives, right? It is only God creating the universe, God creating the earth, the Garden of Eden, the creation of humanity, the expulsion from Eden, Cain and Abel. Boom, that is it. Okay? The beauty of that is that it is so filled with so much symbolism and so much drama and pageantry that there was so much the artist had to say about it. And what happened was it became this interfaith dialogue, just to a much larger cultural dialogue. It became, not only was it an Abrahamic discussion, it became the discussion between the religious artists, the quote spiritual and then agnostic artists, and the artists that didn't necessarily believe in religion, but they thought the material held something for them, and they wanted to get back to that kind of material as a way to make art. And so now it became a religious conversation with a secular conversation. Finally, other people got keyed into the exhibition, people who were not from the Abrahamic faiths, and it became a kind of global phenomenon. I have to say, we went through almost 400 pieces of artwork. We chose 125 artists, which is the largest exhibition the Salon has ever done. Ever. 70 artists in 3 venues, okay? Here, which I'm going to do thank yous in a minute, but here, Riverside Church, which premiered last week, is a smaller show of about 15 artists. That's across the street. That closes at 5 in the afternoon. If you're in the area and want to check out both venues. And then in about 3 weeks, we have our last opening at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which is the place where they educate and make ready the conservative rabbis. So we have right there, we have a church group, and then Riverside Church next door, and then the Jewish Theological Seminary, okay? At this point, I guess I want to thank everyone involved with the show, because the show was such a massive undertaking. Again, taking over 3 years. I want to thank Caravan, who's a partner organization. They're not here tonight, but we partnered with them, and that's Paul Gordon Chandler and Claire, who's in England. I hope you're watching this. We worked with them. And they are a Christian and Islamic kind of arts organization, and the 3 venues. So tonight I want to thank the Interchurch Center, Paula, who's here tonight, and Jen, who's been amazing. Jen, where are you? You here? Just amazing, wonderful to work with, like a dream, really amazing. Last week was Riverside Church, and that's Richard Glassy over there, and the Jewish Theological Seminary, that's Rabbi Bert Vizatsky, and Mark, who's head of operations there. So, also, I wanted to thank the people that helped us connect with those people. Siona Benjamin, who was on the panel tonight, who introduced us to people, and also Toby Khan, who's not here tonight, but they helped us to start the initial conversation going. Is there anyone else I want to thank? Oh, the advisors. We got all these people. If you look at the catalog, Richard's going to talk about the catalog and the essays and everything. 9 essays in the catalog, interlocking themes concerning Genesis. All the advisors work for nothing or next to nothing. Like, in other words, everyone donated hours and hours and hours of time, not because they were getting paid, not because they thought there was something they could get out of it, but because they saw this more than an art show, but as a place where artists could try to see each other in a global community, a global confederation, and have something to say to each other in a very positive and accepting way. And I'm very grateful to have been able to do that. The whole crew who's here tonight, Yona is the head of the Jewish Art Salon. We'll get to that. Richard, my buddy, it's like a professional marriage. I would say we take turns. Sometimes he's Batman, sometimes I'm Batman, and he's Robin. We go back and forth. Goldie Gross, who was not here tonight, curated, also was a senior curator on the show and did the editing on the catalog. Incredible job. I think that's it for the thank you. So we could talk endlessly about this. We have to move on to the panel. What I will do now is introduce my friend and compatriot, Richard McBee. He is a painter of biblical subjects. We know each other going on 40 years, 35 years. Yona started the salon, but we were there at the very first meeting, and we knew her before the first meeting. So we have been involved with this since 2008. He's going to talk about that a little bit. So I introduce my friend, Richard McBee.
Joel, thank you so much. Professional marriage, yeah, it's really kind of scary. But as he says, we're friends for a very long time and compatriots in art and in thought. We've been working on this exhibition for close to 3 years. The last, I don't know, maybe 6 months have been very, very intense. So I want to point out something for all of you. First of all, we have some things here that you should know about. There's a panel right outside the door here, which actually has a number of texts of the creation narratives, both Christian and Jewish, and also Islamic, and actually a Samaritan text. I encourage you to read the text because, of course, creation narratives start with words. So, but the words have been taken on, a life has been breathed into it by the artists that you find here. These 40 artists are amazing in so much as they are so incredibly different from one another. The visions are different. Please look at them and start to hear them talk to one another. To help that conversation, we've put together artist statements, okay? So these are out there. If you don't have one, come to me. I'll give you one. We have an art statement, and many of the artists have actually spoken about their work to give you a little of an entree into that visual phenomena. And finally, we have a catalog. Catalog has 7 essays in it that looks at the different aspects of this show, the way we conceived of the show. You couldn't imagine this, but so we had, as Joel said, so many applications. But when we finally decided upon about 120 works that were worthy of being in an exhibition, the themes started to emerge from the works. We didn't make these themes. The artworks made them and made us focus into 7 separate categories. And that's what, first of all, this catalog is about. They have essays about these themes, and then, of course, reproductions of the artwork. So join us in this journey to look at the creation narratives from from very least 70 different perspectives, and here tonight, 40 different artists who look at it very, very differently. This is how we are creative beings. These artists all say one thing as differently as they say it, and that is that the notion of creation, however it is expressed in either these physical texts or their own appreciation of it, is the fuel that makes them artists. And to make that art, that's what you're seeing on the walls. And they're speaking with one another because they all speak slightly different languages. And that's the miracle of this exhibition. So just keep it all in mind. And thank you very much for having us here. And I want to introduce Yona Guerra, who is the president of the Jewish Art Salon, a dear friend. We've known each other, oh my goodness, we don't mention how many years. So on with the show.
So tonight's panel, each panelist has chosen 2 artworks from the exhibition. Okay, one of the panelists chose 1 artwork. And just to start a discussion point. So it's now my honor to introduce the panelists. Siona Benjamin, raise your hand, is a painter from Mumbai, now living in the US. Her work reflects her background of being brought up Jewish in a Hindu and Muslim India. She was awarded Fulbright Fellowship 2011 to India and second Fulbright 2017 to Israel. Her work is featured in the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Jewish Week, Boston Globe, Jerusalem Post, and many others. Grace Bidalik is a writer, performer, and administrator living in New York City. Originally from Omaha, Nebraska, she's a member of the musical theater class of 2018 at the University of Michigan and a proud Wolverine. She's the director of the Dissident Project, theater critic for the New York Sun, and co-founder of It Is Good, a festival of arts and faith. Shilpi Chandra is an art historian and curator with a focus on contemporary art of Asia and South Asia and its diaspora. Her curatorial practice is rooted in making art accessible to lay audiences by conceiving exhibitions that bring people into public and community spaces. She has an MA in Contemporary Art History, Theory, and Criticism from SUNY Purchase College, an MBA from Columbia Business School, and a BA from Swarthmore College. She regularly teaches adult education classes on Chinese and Indian art history and contemporary Asian art history. And Afarin Rahmanifar is an Iranian-American artist, educator, and curator based in Connecticut. She grew up in Tehran and later moved to the United States following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. She's currently associate professor at ECSU, and her multidisciplinary work consists of mixed media painting, installation, printmaking, sculpture, and animated film production. And she's been featured in the London-based Eastern Art Report magazine and exhibited at Two Coats of Paint, New York, Cerro 20 Gallery, Towson University, and many others. So we're starting off the first question, which is, why should we focus on the Genesis and creation narratives? Why is this content important to the artist or to you? You have all selected works in the exhibition as a discussion point. How are these works related to your ideas concerning the sacred and specifically the feminine sacreds? I want to start it off with Siona.
Is it working? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this piece and also talk about my piece because it was interesting to me that both this piece and my piece are addressing the mythology of Lilith. Lilith is the first wife of Adam. She was cast out of Eden, and I've always been drawn to her. My piece is called Amistad, and I'm going to look to you when you raise your hand when it's 30 seconds left for me to stop talking. Mine is called Amistad, a slave ship for a new century. I've made a boat like triptych inspired by the medieval European retablas, which open up to display Judeo-Christian themes. I combined that with the idea of a boat, a slave ship, carrying numerous refugees, hopefully into safety from their countries and dictators of persecution. Many blue-seated men sit packed in the golden boat, huddled, motionless, and scared yet hopeful. Lilith, who is Kali, who is also Medusa, always blamed for her cries of mercy and justice. Is this the moral and human condition of our era? And also I want to go on to say that the boat, which is from the Genesis, Noah's boat, becomes any boat, in this case, a boat transporting refugees and hopefully into safety. Noah's Ark is the ship in the Genesis flood narrative. God spares Noah's family and animals from a global deluge or flood. So my question is, will these refugees, this new boat, this new Amistad, will it be saved again from their own flood, from their own persecution? And I want to compare that to, not compare, but talk about, and please excuse me if I'm pronouncing her last name wrong, Sarah Nguyen. Oh, I did it wrong. I really liked her piece. It's beautiful. It casts shadows as she leaves the Garden of Eden. Lilith is a tiger leaving Eden to regain her independence. And I wanted to say that in Indian mythology, and Shilpi will back me up on it since she studied that there's a lot of transformation of goddesses into animals, and how Lilith becomes a tiger, and that regains her kind of strength, and she's not powerless when she leaves Eden. And I found that really interesting in this piece of mine, of hers. And I can relate to that because I tie a lot of my work with animals too, half animals, half humans. And I like to recycle mythology because I read the book, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell a long time ago. And I was fascinated with the concept of recycling mythology. And then I got introduced to Midrash. And that was it's like a bottomless pit. You just can barely scratch the surface and keep learning about it. And so it's really amazing for me that world mythology can be also explored in this way and kind of connected. I think my time is up. Yes.
Oh, man. There we go. Awesome. Hi, guys. Firstly, I'd love to say thank you to the Jewish Art Salon, to Joel, to Yona, to Richard, and also to Goldie, wherever she may be. I'm very humbled to be in the presence of so many incredible artists tonight. So thank you so much for having me up here. As far as sort of the importance of the creation narrative and of Genesis across the Abrahamic faiths, I wanted to lean on people who were more qualified than me to speak to the issue. So I have brought forth quotes from Mako Fujimura, who is an artist, a Christian artist, who talks a lot about his faith and his work, and is a kintsugi artist. And so he takes these old, broken pieces of pottery and mends them back together with precious metals, thereby making them more valuable than when they were first broken. And he says about creation, he says, Psalm 139, 13 through 14 reminds us, "For you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and I am wonderfully made." Perhaps in eternity's gaze, he says, "I have been seen and created to be an artist in imitation of God, the creator artist. My identity is actually rooted in the origin of creation and in that loving gaze of the creator who sees us in a quote-unquote greater love before we are even aware the creative impulse is to shape the future." So this quote has always sort of informed the way that I saw the creation narrative, and also in my hand in it, and in artists' hands in it. And Dorothy Sayers writes, "To be human is to be creative. The characteristic common to God and to man is apparently the desire and the ability to make things." So if we are, people of the Abrahamic faith, we believe that we have been invited into the creation narrative, and it's not just archaic text, but it is text that informs the way that we live. We've been invited into the creation narrative, and in that vein, Bishop Wright expands on this theologically, and he says, "What you do in the Lord is not in vain. You are not oiling the wheels of a machine that's about to roll over a cliff. You're not restoring a great painting that is shortly about to be thrown into the fire. You're not planting roses in a garden that's about to be dug up for a building site. You are, strange though it may seem, almost hard to believe as the resurrection itself, accomplishing something that will become in due course part of God's new world. We are, as artists, engaged in kingdom work." And I have always found that to be incredibly encouraging. So the first work, I guess the only work that I have chosen to extrapolate on, is Maayan's piece called Moment 18, No Turning Back. And you guys can see it up here. When I first looked at it, I was actually intrigued because I didn't know what to think about it. My first inclination was perhaps that this was Moses striking the rock in Numbers 20, 8 through 12, right? When he is joined in creation with God, in bringing forth water to the Israelite people, but instead of acting for the glorification of God, acts in defiance, right? And this is a moment that actually it solidifies the fact that he'll never see the promised land. He'll never enter the land to which he has been guiding the Israelites for so long. And actually, I had the chance to speak with my aunt about this piece. And her interpretation of her piece was not so dissimilar. She chose the number 18 because in Judaism, chai, it means life. It represents life, right? And actually, my aunt's name means spring of water, so that's another reason why the Moshe narrative came to mind. But the full name of the piece means a moment, right? She says it here. It's no turning back. She was thinking of Adam and Eve or Cain and Abel when she made this piece. It's a moment that you cannot turn back from. The Jerusalem stone that she's using here is nearly impenetrable, and it's being speared by glass. And so it's a painful reminder of the shift in our relationship with Hashem. And she says here, actually, one simple act, the shattered covenant, one simple act, the shattered relationship, both forsaking his protection, what becomes the cost of disobedience. So I actually thought that was a really interesting correlation that came to mind naturally.
So I come to this panel as an art historian, and the two pieces that I chose to talk about really spoke to me aesthetically about this topic of creation, and creation, as God says in the Genesis, from a void, from nothing, from nothingness. So this piece by Diane Churchill really kind of, that luminous quality, the luminous working of the surface, that sort of shows this, the void that might have been there. You can just kind of imagine what it might have been. Really spoke to me about sort of what creation might have looked like, or what this void might have looked like, where we started then just certain things started then coming into the world. So this piece really, I think the surface and even the size of it, kind of also reminds me of Mark Rothko's meditative pieces, and she does cite him as an influence. That same sort of like that quality that when you look at the surface, you can kind of start imagining what creativity in the beginning might have been like. So this was a piece that. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me then pick it up. Then, great. So, and then I contrasted this piece with the next piece by Kimetta Pearl, who makes, I think, it very, very feminine creativity. Makes it very figurative. So women, even when they're in pain, they also are thinking about others. And in this case, she titles it, God Nourishes the Earth with Her Tears. So I think that also really speaks to me about the panel, about the feminine, and how women, even when we are in pain, we are also, thinking about others. And so with her tears and figuratively in this piece, the artist uses beads and other sort of very tactile materials to give representation to who she sees as the creator. So both of these pieces sort of spoke to me in different ways about what creation might have been like and what we might have what this might have looked like. So that's.
Hi, everyone.
It is.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Afirine Romanova, and I'm so thrilled to be here. And this is a fabulous exhibition, and I'm just so thrilled to be part of it. And I want to thank everyone for inviting me, especially and Yona, that she's my old friend from many, many years ago. And it's a fantastic exhibition. I'm really enjoying it. And so for the first question that we have, it's the narrative of the Genesis, and it's pretty much, it explains, and it's very self-explanatory, this story and narrative of Genesis, and the story of that it's how the world and humanity was created, and this is the beauty of it, and we are here to celebrate that, celebrating the Genesis, and I want to also to talk about my work, and this piece that you see here, it's a Genesis. But for me, Genesis opens a creation of light and water. So that was the area that I was focusing on, and I wanted to celebrate that, and both physical and supernatural or natural aspect of it, and kind of the manifestation of it is quite kind of impressive for me, and I was really focusing on the concept of that. And usually I don't work this way, and I have, but this piece, it was really kind of impressive and kind of initiating and making me to create this blessing work and sort of manifesting the celebration for me of Genesis. And as we know, light and water are the, blessed, that we are blessed for these creation. And so I wanted to really uniting these two elements and bring it and introduce it to my work. And the visual dynamic kind of surface that you see here, it's created with a variety of different materials. As you see that, acrylic, transparent films, and paper on board. And so it was a great kind of experience, and I sort of, explore myself and explore the material through the subject of water and light. And basically the color palette basically for me was speaking the earth and speaking the nature for me. So what you see here is representing the color palette, representing the nature and the soil and appreciation of the soil and dynamic of the nature. It was the main part of it, and beautiful God's tree creation. That's the blessing part of this piece. And material that I used allowed me basically to get into dynamic aspect of the whole creation of this piece. So one and the other, so can we see the other? That's okay. And oh, I'm sorry. Yes. This picture that I chose is I saw this sweet piece and I was really intrigued by that, and I wanted to really, because there are some crossroads. I could just see the work that is sort of, it's a complex and it's rich, and I wanted to think of it in terms of the other people, that how their complexity of the situation of seeing, forbidden fruit and eating the forbidden fruit, it sort of amplifies the beauty of a female for me in this picture. Yes.
Time for only really one more topic before we hand it over to you, the audience, for questions and answers. So the next topic is, how does the idea of the feminine impact your life, art, writing, or scholarship? And in general, what is your view of the feminine regarding spirituality and or creativity? So I would say, Shilpi, take it away.
Thank you. So so the feminine to me, it's actually kind of there's a complexity to that word, because we have feminine as meaning sort of the opposite of masculine, and so there's that sort of like the duality between something that is soft and with the qualities that we associate with the feminine versus the masculine. But then from feminine also, we also have feminism, and from there we have a more idea of self actualization and agency for women. So for me, the feminine kind of it encompasses both of these sort of dualities of features, and I write, in my writing also I deal with a lot with artists who are women artists, and I really like to approach it more, of course, with this idea of agency and how we can mold it to our current circumstances, and how we can engage sort of maybe expectations or subvert those expectations in different ways. So again, it's for me, it's more about sort of teasing out these nuances when I work with artists and when I see different artworks.
Yeah, I mirror that idea that femininity, or the feminine capitalized, which it was on the question, is such a complex idea, right? Because we have biological sex, obviously. We have sort of that binary. Although, it's not, the feminine is not necessarily sex specific, because we have sort of a group of traits that often correlates to biological sex, but oftentimes doesn't. And so it's interesting, and I'm wondering what the rest of the panelists up here think about femininity and the feminine as well. But I sort of like to force a definition in situations like this. I like to have something concrete that we're working from, and what more concrete definition of quote unquote the feminine than to look at Genesis, which is the text that we're all here tonight to look at. And even in just Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, there's some really interesting things to pull out here. So Genesis 1 and 2 go, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and it was empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. So in just Genesis 1 and 2, we have Elohim in the original Hebrew text, which is in its masculine, which means God in the masculine form, right? It is a masculine noun. In Genesis 2, we have Ruach, right? Which is the feminine way to describe the feminine form of the Spirit of God. And so we have ideas of the masculine and feminine that actually just supersede sex altogether and humanity altogether, and are instead represented in the image of God. In the image of God are masculine and feminine. And in also Genesis 1:27, we have here, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Of course, doesn't always necessarily apply to, biological sex, but we also see that both male and female are equal bearers of the image of God, which I think is so cool. And so in the way that, the feminine is important and is something that I inherently understand, it's also incredibly important to understand the way that balances sort of more masculine energy, right? Elohim, we see, establishes order, and Ruach moves and activates and stirs within that established order to create life. It is a life force. And so that's sort of how I think about masculine and feminine energy in my work. But yeah, in order to have one, you also must have the other. Both are incredibly important.
Well, it's a very large subject and very important to me. But I was thinking, how do I approach it? And I was thinking that I would tell you that I was raised Jewish in India, right? And there are amazing feminine characters, female powerful goddesses in Hinduism. And here I came from a religion that was monotheistic, and I could look at it from afar, but I could never bow down to it because, God forbid, if my grandmother found out that I did so. Whoa. So, but I was surrounded by it, and and also it was a little patriarchal in the sense that I found out about Shekinah much later on, and that there was a female aspect to God. But in Hinduism, there was the Ardhanarishvara, the half man and the half woman, the Shiva and the Parvati, all these feminine Kali and Durga and all these amazing characters with tongues sticking out and 10 heads and whatnot. And it's like, that was so powerful. And then here was my monotheistic religion, which was more patriarchal. But then, ironically, my family and Jewish family that goes way back in that part of the world, 2,000 years, they would call Mother India and Father Israel, because everybody wanted to go to Israel, and most of my family is in Israel, even though India is one of the few countries that Jews were not persecuted for various reasons, and we can discuss that another day. But, Mother India, Father Israel, that was interesting for me too. And then later on, finding out about the Shekinah, finding out about characters like Lilith and all these wonderful women in the Torah, studying with Rabbi Burton Vysotsky, and another couple of rabbis, and I do several commissions that involves Midrash. And it's so amazing that I also learned with some women rabbis who really know how to tap into the female mysticism of Judaism. And so that is the route that I kind of took. And it's like I said, 10 lifetimes will not be able to have me produce enough art or scratch the surface on this topic. So I think that's all I have to say, because I could talk for a long time on this, but I won't. Thank you. Oh, you know what? I just wanted to say thank you to the Jewish Art Salon. They are like family to me, really. I don't have much family here in the United States, but, they are really wonderful set of artists that really encourage each other and really are there for each other. So I thank you for being there in my life.
Hi again, and I know that she gave a good kind of introduction about my background, and I moved out of the Iran following the revolution in 1979. But I want to give you some information about my work and how what are the concepts that I'm after in my work. So I take a great interest investigating women's historic roles in society. That's one of the areas that I focus and concentrate in my work. And mainly work of poetry, mainly women poetry, but in general poetry, and to amplify the contemporary woman's voice, basically. And I deconstruct and reconstruct the aspect of female figures in society. And I understand this journey, that my journey is really towards the present identity that I have, that I, as an Iranian American woman, through these concepts, basically. And one of the things that I want to state that stands out through the journey that I had with this project and working with Genesis project, it was the fact that it was really woman is the central character, and that initiates idea even to make sins and eating the forbidden fruit. And we're here to celebrate this movement of women, that it's, that making the sin is one of the things that it's been forbidden, but at the same time initiate to take this risk and eat the forbidden fruit. It was quite amazing movement that she did, and she was really taking the risk and kind of wanted to really be initiating that kind of sin, to experiment with it, to project that and see what's going to happen. So I think that's one of the beautiful part of the Genesis project, and that for me was this part. And I think basically the story of Adam and Eve, which you call it Hava in Quran, really conveys a profoundly positive kind of aspect and optimistic attitudes of God and towards the humanity. And that is basically its contrast with the current practice of repressive regimes across the world. So these are some of the areas that I was really focusing on, and it was quite kind of impressive for me to characterize the female figures that they are mentioned in Genesis, as opposed to
Thank you, panelists. Audience, we invite you to comment, ask questions, maybe yell them out, but if we can't hear it, I'll walk to you with the microphone. So who has a question or a statement? Yes, winning red. Oh, it's Gabriella Boris? Oh, it's hard to see. There's backlight.
No questions.
I'll just wait if somebody else has a question.
Thank you so much for giving so many insights on this subject. I'm wondering if you can comment on the act of creation as being this partnership between the feminine and masculine versus really one that's more dominated by the feminine itself. Feminine imagery is often overwhelmed by discussion of the womb or the process of creating life forms. But of course, there are two people, two entities, two forces involved. And there is a feminine aspect of God, the Shekhinah, in Jewish mysticism, but also, of course, the masculine aspect. So how do you see that interplay of forces resulting in, life as we know it on Earth, or how we connect to these ethereal, more spiritual concepts outside?
We can go back and forth too. I'm intrigued about your answer as well, Richard. But and mine is very short, but I think just going back to the idea of the necessity of balance in the masculine and feminine, right? Light cannot exist without the dark, yin without the yang. The idea that the feminine and masculine ideas are often thought of in sort of the philosophical realm in terms of order and chaos, right? So Elohim establishes the created order, and Ruach moves and activates and brings alive creation within that order. I think that balance is incredibly important. And like I said, examining the feminine only makes the masculine more, it only makes me more thankful for the masculine counterpart, because I understand that one cannot exist without the other.
So I do want to, in terms of masculine, feminine, and creativity, let me just go slightly off to the side. Part of this sheet that talks about the different narratives, textual narratives, there's a quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, and I think it's germane to what we're talking about. And Rabbi Sacks writes, "The first chapter of Genesis therefore contains a teaching. It tells us how to be creative, namely in 3 stages. The first is the stage of saying, let there be. The second is the stage of, and there was. And the third is the stage of seeing that it is good. That's about art. When an artist starts to make something, he and she says, it must be. I have to make an image. The image has to happen. And then it is, and you work with it, and you relate to it. But you notice out here how much there is that was good? It's beautiful. That's minimally what's good about this art. Some of it is incredibly beautiful. This really echoes what Rabbi Sacks says about creation and creativity.
Thank you for including my work in your presentation, Kimeta Pearl, God Nourishing the Earth with Her Tears. I think I wanted to say that this piece was included, and I felt a little mixed about putting this piece in because it is a woman crying, and but I decided to enter it in the show nonetheless, even though it represented the crying, possibly the weakness of a woman, but because the tears were nourishing the earth, there is a lot to cry about now in terms of the earth and nourishing the earth. But I also wanted to say that I think that within the female, there is what we call, and I think you spoke to that, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, that there is the feminine, but as female artists, we are filled with all kinds of agency, both the Shekhinah, the indwelling, and Lilith, the rebel, and I think I would like to hear from you more about these different aspects of female creators. So I don't know if there's anybody who can speak to that, but, you know, so often when we speak about the feminine or women, we are anxious to also say, yeah, well, there's also the masculine. Men still play a part. Don't worry. So this is a time, I think, to hear about the feminine and the female. So please speak to that and the power of women's creativity. Thank you.
Can I just say, was that a question or? Okay. Okay. I want to just mention a couple of things that throughout times, you know, artists have realized that art can play a significant role in shaping female or shaping history for female figures in history, and they have let it go of idea of being too descriptive with the art that they're producing, and finding that more profound meaning out of the one of the revolutionary ways of putting it together and representing female figures or female identities with the social progress that they make. You know, that kind of putting the meanings through that direction. It's been one of the historical event, I think, for female and femininity in that regard.
Okay, we have time for one more question. There are people in the back who are raising their hands.
I want to thank you all for putting together the show. I think Genesis is extremely important for our times, and cross-faith dialogue is even more important. My fear is, and this is, I'll just ask it, is do we not blaspheme in that the bird population in the United States alone, a third of it has been wiped out since I've been in high school. We have millions of people in migratory patterns because they're being starved at the lands they occupy. Children are dying right now in Eastern Africa. There's a war in Ukraine because Putnam is using the tools of World War II to frame his worldview, which is supported by the Russian Orthodox Church. We all read the same newspapers, but my question is, it seems to me that we have to look forward as well as back, and that I think the whole creation is at risk in the rules that were, divinely inspired. And I don't know if there won't be a reckoning. I don't, and I didn't feel any of that energy in the show, which is great, but I'm just asking the question.
Some of the, I'm the head curator, and the themes of the show were kind of created by me in a way. I guess the answer is that the show was conceived in a liberal modernist way, and that the show is not, we have people who have traditional views and everything, but I think what you're talking about is a question of fundamentalist readings of the book as opposed to new interpretations of the book. And there are a part of ecological readings about Genesis. In Genesis, God gives stewardship of the earth to humanity. That is a powerful responsibility that we need to respond to and to all up to. So for every person who is of religious conviction, I think it behooves them to not just say, well, God's going to take care of it, because we are the stewards of the earth. That is a very important role for us to assume. My wife and I are vegans in that way, and there's a Jewish vegan organization like that, and there are religious people who believe that the rules need to be, that within the book itself, within Genesis and readings of the Quran and the religious books, can be read in a liberal progressive way as well as in other ways. So I think that's the beauty of this material, is that it can be interpreted in ways, and I'm not, by saying that we have stewardship of the earth, that's not countermanding how the book was written. That, in other words, there's room for that interpretation. So I think it is important, even as a religious person. I mean, if you look at Gandhi was familiar with all the religious books, responded to all the religious traditions, and then crafted his view on how to behave in India against the British using those sacred books. So it's very possible to have a liberal view or a progressive view of the earth and still deal with Genesis. So I think it's important to voice that. So I'm glad you asked that question.
I think insofar as, creators and artists, it seems to me that we're allies sort of reaching toward the same goals for society, right? The same sort of social goals for society. We have Judaism to thank, like the granddaddy of the Abrahamic faiths, for putting forth, our first justice system in Leviticus and in Numbers. And of course, Christianity took those values and ran with them, and Islam did much the same. And so we have much to share and to learn from one another, and to challenge one another in. And I think that, this show and interfaith dialogue more broadly is such an important thing. It's so remarkable and humbling to be in this room for that very reason. Because again, liberal, conservative, Muslim, Christian, Jew, we are all venturing toward the same society in participating in kingdom work and in the work of artists. So, yeah.
And that then leads to the concept of tikkun ha'olam, which ties into the creativity and reminds you that it is important to piece together and to bring together things. And I think the power of art is pretty, strong in being able to do that.
Great. Oh, you wanted to add something, Richard, real quick?
Yes. So you got to see the miracle, what's out here. We're in New York City, and New York City is basically one of the centers of the art world. What's going on out there is close to unheard of in the art world. We are breaking rules, and we're breaking them not with, quote, traditional art where it's some realistic illustration, but this art is all over the place. This art is embedded in modernism, in postmodernism, and in current thought, and it's saying that we can be very creative artists using the tools of our time and reach back into our creation narratives and say they're important. They aren't just in a dustbin of history, not at all. That's one of the miracles of this show. I hope you appreciate it.
Thank you all panelists. Thank you, Richard and Joel and Goldie, for curating this, and the other curators as well, Abigail Meyer, Claire Pearman, and Susan Meislich. You are invited to go back, partake of some of the refreshments, look at the work again, meet other people, and thank you so much for attending. Ross, you had a question? We only have a few copies. You really are encouraged to there's a sheet out there with a QR code. Just go there and you can order one. Because these are only for, just like 3. Thank you.